Hello and welcome to the Lift Up Journeys podcast. My name is Katie and I am one of the founding members of Lift Up Women in Life Sciences, a community created to connect, champion and inspire women from academia through to C-suite across the life sciences industry. I'm looking forward to sharing with you an inspiring collection of career stories from a group of wonderful women who work in leadership positions across the life sciences industry. I hope by listening to these stories, you will feel inspired in your own career and gain the skills, confidence, and knowledge you need to climb the career ladder and break through the glass ceiling. So on today's episode, we are joined by Melisa Medrano. Melisa started her career with a degree in microbiology at New Mexico State University, where she gained laboratory experience working in a biochemistry lab. She earned her PhD at the Tufts Molecular Microbiology program in Boston and graduated in January of 2008 during the economic recession. Melisa saw an industry bench role and ultimately was headhunted for a job in recruitment, where she's been ever since. In July 2013, Melisa joined Gilead Sciences, where she helped Gilead to build a variety of functions, including their Oceanside biologics site. She later joined NGM Bio and then was fortunate enough to be called for the role of Associate Director of Talent Acquisition at Sonoma Bio. She has since been promoted to Director of Talent and is passionate about seeking and hiring qualified candidates across the functions and helping with career development and retention efforts too. Melisa is also very active in the diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging initiatives, and particularly enjoys supporting students to transition from academia into the industry. Melisa, however, is from New Mexico originally, going to grad school over in Tufts in Boston, lived there for 10 years before eventually relocating over to the West Coast where she's based now. So would love to hear a little bit about where your journey began, Melisa. So if we maybe go back to when you were in school, maybe just before you joined university. Tell me a little bit about what school was like for you. What subjects did you particularly enjoy?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I always did well at school. And it was a little bit of a transition going to university, right? Because I kind of had to try a little harder, but and I always really liked the sciences. And so that was always, even from the time that I was a kid, I always wanted to do something either, in psychology or in the sciences. Definitely biology was always a love of mine. And then I hit the hard reality of taking a physics class and a chemistry class in high school and realized that it wasn't all going to be smooth sailing. But I decided to sort of press on. And when I went to college, it was first as a biology major and then as a microbiology major, just to focus in a little bit. I also have a double major in Spanish, but I'm a little rusty, so.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. So talk to me more about your time at university. Obviously a big academia change for a lot of people. How did you enjoy your time at New Mexico?
I loved it. It did take me 5 years. I had a couple of false starts. And so, and again, it was kind of a rude awakening getting to university and, not ever having had to really study in high school. And so I definitely excelled in the biology, microbiology, things like that. But again, the chemistry and the physics were just kind of the banes of my existence. So I ended up retaking a couple of those classes and then getting A's in them. Just needed a little more time with those subjects. And, and then ended up really just embracing the lab work. Especially, I was fortunate enough to be a part of a couple of minority access programs. Later on, it was MARC, which is Minority Access to Research Careers. So I actually received a stipend to do the lab work that I did, and also they helped pay for my schooling. So it was like a full scholarship kind of thing. And I just never would have gotten the same experience had I not had the opportunities through those programs. So that was really, really made a difference in kind of my access to science.
Absolutely, absolutely. And was science always your favorite topic when you were going through school? Was it something that just fascinated you?
It was really always something that fascinated me. But the other thing that really fascinated me was English. I was always really good at English, and diagramming sentences for some reason. I was like super good at that. So I had to work a little harder for science, but it was more interesting and it seemed like a more viable career prospect to me than being like an English professor or something like that. Or like my mother who studied English and is a lawyer or was a lawyer. So,
Wow, that's quite a different career route to
yes,
go down, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah,
it
wow.
definitely is.
Goodness me. And when you were younger, what were your dreams? Who did you aspire to be?
It's funny because I never really aspired to be a who, just because I didn't know, who was in science. None of my parents were like the first to go to college in their families. And so I didn't really know who was in science. I just knew, like if you watch the movies, or I used to love watching like Nova and things like that. But I'm dating myself a little bit here, but I
Not
grew
at
up in
all.
the 80s.
Not at all. Not at all. That's really interesting. And in terms of the characteristics, looking back now, what characteristics do you felt that you showed in your time at university that really allowed you to be successful there?
Well, eventually it's just putting in the work, right? I think I'm a hard worker and a lot of it is just, reviewing your note. And it took me a while to learn that, right? I didn't have necessarily my parents were kind of like, "Okay, you're going to college," but I didn't have any, tools. And so it took me a while to learn, okay, you review your notes every night, rewrite them if you need to. And then, just many hours of being in the library, falling asleep over science textbooks. So it was definitely, just a bit of a hard work. And I remember even going to grad school thinking while I was in grad school, this is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it was. And obviously, you went to Tufts for grad school as well, didn't you? So,
I
talk to
did.
me about the relocation, because that must have been a big life move for you to leave New Mexico.
It was a big life move. And, growing up, born and bred in New Mexico, moving to Boston, I actually went during the summer up early so that I could get acclimated to Boston. And I did a summer rotation through one of the labs, just so that I could, find my way around, learning how to use the subway, learning how to, navigate. At that time, Boston wasn't the safest. And Tufts, the medical school where I went, is in Chinatown and in downtown. So it used to be called the combat zone when I was first there. So it was definitely, just interesting, and not that New Mexico is, the bastion of safety and things like that, but it was just interesting getting to know a different place and the East Coast winters, real winters. I mean, New Mexico gets snow, but it's not real winters really.
It's not the same. No. And did you move to Tufts completely on your own? Did you have any friends that kind of followed you on that journey at all? Or
I went with my boyfriend at the time. He actually had been accepted into Harvard and was at the Harvard grad school. So we actually lived on site in the Harvard campus housing in Cambridge. And so that was really nice just because, yeah, it would have been really hard to, start from scratch in a new city completely.
absolutely, it's a big move to make for anyone, particularly to be able to do that on your own, where you don't have your family network around you, you don't have that friendship group around you either. It's a big move when you're studying. And you were there for how many years were you at Tufts for?
I was at Tufts for 7 years, but I was in Boston for a total of 10 years.
Fantastic. Wow. And coming out of Tufts, graduating, completing your time there, congratulations. Um,
Thank you.
where where did you go from there? What happened? What was the next step for you at that point?
So I was very tired at that point. And so next steps for me were, a little bit of kind of figuring out what I wanted to do next. I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have a postdoc lined up. I didn't want to do an academic postdoc. I was looking for jobs in industry. And so really, I just looked for about 5 or 6 months to see what I could find, and there just wasn't much of anything. So that was kind of when I started, trying to get creative with things.
Yeah. What type of roles were you looking for in industry? What did you
I
have
was
in mind?
looking for lab roles in industry. So I was looking at industry postdocs as well as just kind of whatever I thought, I could do in the lab. Whether it was just molecular biology, scientists, anything.
Wow. And that wasn't the job that you ended up securing, was it?
It
Talk to me about
absolutely was
what
not.
happened.
Yeah, so as I was getting calls from different recruiters, I was realizing that they didn't have sort of the scientific understanding to really know where to submit me. So I was kind of telling them, why are you submitting me to this role? I don't have any of this kind of background or experience. And so it just seemed like there was a bit of a disconnect for some of the recruiters that were trying to do technical recruiting. And so I ended up asking a few of them, sort of, hey, can I talk to your manager and ask, just ask about what it takes to be a recruiter in the industry. And I figured, if I couldn't be at the lab in the industry, then at least I could be, staying close to the science and working within the industry.
Yeah. Did you know anything about recruitment back then?
Oh, nothing. I knew nothing. I knew nothing about industry. I knew nothing about recruitment. I was applying right, left, and center to things that were utterly not appropriate. And, just again, to get a foot in the door. And I see that with a lot of, folks coming out of academia. And so that's been part of, I try to give back a little bit and help people out, and sort of say, no, these are the types of roles you want to apply for, not these. And, just because industry is different altogether than academia.
And it's understanding firsthand the challenges that somebody is likely to face, isn't it? It's saying,
Absolutely.
I've been in your situation. I know what that looked like, and I can help you and point you in the right direction. And I believe it was Kelly's that gave you that first opportunity.
Yeah, so Kelly Scientific was actually a great sort of stomping grounds to learn recruitment just because, they're huge and they just have tons of resources. So it was really great training in terms of all of the HR laws and, kind of how to talk to candidates, what you can and can't say to candidates, what you can and can't ask candidates, which has gotten, more rigid over time. And so a lot of the basics, as well as just negotiating, how to negotiate with employers and candidates to get the business and then fill the business.
So, am I correct in understanding you were with Kelly for a number of years, weren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was with Kelly for 5 years, 3 years in the Boston marketplace and 2 years in the California marketplace. And so it was really interesting. I got a very broad exposure to, um, biotech, pharma, industrial biotech. So that was at the time when a lot of biomass, for energy was being tested. And so it was really great just to gain that exposure, even like, some of these turbines, we would just anything scientific or engineering related, we would work on. And so But my love and my interest has always been in pharma and biotech.
Yeah, I completely can resonate with that. It's the same interest for me. I love that part of the industry. I love the development that we see. I love the work that people are doing to treat patients who have undiagnosed conditions or rare conditions. I think it's a really motivating industry to be a part of. And obviously the move at Kelly's took you to the West Coast, so
It
a
did.
huge relocation opportunity for you.
Yes. Yeah, basically myself, my husband, and three cats packed all of our stuff into a Honda Civic and drove cross country, stopping off in New Mexico on the way, which was great.
And obviously, you're with Gilead for a number of years, working on some really core projects for them. What made you choose to move on and join? It was the team at NGM. What prompted the move?
Absolutely. I think, you know, I was called actually for NGM by another former Gilead recruiter. And he said, hey, this is a really great science focused company. He knew what my passion was, staying close to the science. He knew that they were growing. And he also knew that his commute was just getting way too much for him. So he actually referred me for the opportunity. And you know, something that really attracted me to a smaller company was, you know, I was with Gilead when they grew from about 3,500 people globally to like 14,000 people globally. And so you just start to see a lot more layers introduced. You start to see a lot more bureaucracy. You start to have a little less autonomy in decision making. And so that was something that, you know, attracted me to a smaller company is, you know, there's a lot more. You're wearing more hats, you're doing more things, maybe getting exposure to some HR business partner type of activities, which I've gotten, you know, exposure to. And so it was just really exciting for me to go to a small, scrappy company, not necessarily a startup, but one that was really focused on the science and really bench to bedside, getting medicines to patients, but also really, really science focused.
What part of in-house recruitment have you enjoyed the most?
You know, it's really being a part of the team and not it, you know, being an agency recruiter is very transactional. Even if your clients remember you and you work with them again and again, it's you're not a part of the team. So that to me has been really rewarding. The other piece is that you're building something, right? So I've really enjoyed builds. It's a little harder to recruit when it's just, you know, replacing people who've moved on. It's less exciting, right? So, you know, at my current company, we hired 77 people last year, and I was an N of one. And so that to me is crazy and frantic, but it's exciting as well. And then again, just the autonomy, and the opportunity.
Wonderful. And I was curious to learn actually from you, Melissa. Have you at any point in your career had a mentor or a coach to look and support you through your own career journey?
I have had, actually. I've been really fortunate. I was chair of the Gileados ERG at Gilead, and they were interested in investing in us. And so they actually got us mentors, and they sent us to like a Hispanic leadership training sort of boot camp. And then I also have been fortunate enough, I was set up with a mentor when I was at Gilead for a little bit of time. And then she moved on in the industry, and so that ended. But at the last two companies I've been at, we've actually invested in something called Modern Health, which is an app. And you end up getting 7 free coaching sessions through the app with just a licensed coach. So it's a little more general. It's not as science specific, but I've found, you know, that at smaller companies where they don't have the resources to get you a mentor, that you know, it's great that they're thinking outside the box and thinking about things like this.
Absolutely. And particularly for women that work in our industry, we are always looking to make connections for those women. So introducing them to people that can give them advice or mentoring opportunities or coaching opportunities to allow the women to develop too. Have you most recently in your career been approached by people looking to have you as a mentor?
I have. And so one of the things that I've been really excited about is, in my expanding role in talent, instead of just talent acquisition, I've had a lot of opportunity to work with a committee to introduce some career development modules at Sonoma Bio, my current company. And so that's been really exciting just because, in a more formal way, we can help with career development discussions. But then also, as I've rolled out those career development discussions, people have approached me and asked if they, could work with me as a mentor. So I actually have a few different people that I work with at Sonoma who, I firmly believe in mentorship as a two-way street. I learn as much from people that I quote unquote, mentor than, as they do from me, So, but I've also was able at Gilead to mentor a number of the recruiters there and train them there just because I was kind of the OG when we got an influx of new recruiters when we grew so much.
Yeah. So there's always been an opportunity for you to give back as much as there has for you to learn as well.
Yeah, and that really is important to me as well, just because I feel like, you know, again, in giving back, you gain so much.
I agree. I agree. And has there been particular learnings for you, maybe in the most recent parts of your career? Has there been standout learnings from the challenges maybe that you faced?
I feel like truthfully, Gilead was such a great learning ground just from a corporate perspective, because that is one thing is that in science, there's no HR if you're in academia. There's no sort of, everybody just kind of, it's the Wild West a little bit, so people can behave badly or they can be really great. And so when I moved to the corporate world, a lot of what I had to learn was, communication, being really concise especially in written communication. I can write like these long emails, but you don't want to do that if you're working with leadership. I also just availed myself of all the trainings that they had, speaking to leadership, having difficult conversations, career development conversations, all of that stuff. So I feel like, that is one thing, being at a kind of larger company, you can always avail yourself of, both at Kelly Scientific and at Gilead, was just the learning and development opportunities. But I feel like more recently, just learning how to, be an associate director and a director, and making sure, like, am I, do I have the right gravitas? Do I have the right, am I sending the right email to the right person at the right time? So there's always a little bit of that sort of corporate, you know, machinations, or sort of moving through things in a corporate way, and trying not to be a bull in a china shop, which I can sometimes be.
It's easily done, I think, isn't it? It's about changing the communication style you have to the environment that you're in and what the particular leaders may look for from you and what your colleagues need from you at the different times. And that's all skills that you gain throughout your career. Nobody teaches you how to do that. That's things you have to learn on the job.
It is absolutely. And just, I think, then also learning how to navigate at a smaller company, which is like a small town sometimes, right? You have to just kind of, uh, kind of handle things with kid gloves sometimes. Whether it's people or processes or things like that. And so, but there really is such a nice opportunity at smaller companies to really form your own processes and influence people, sort of in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that influence is diversity and inclusion. And I think it's incorporating belonging into organizations. What have you personally been working on within the DE&I world, Melissa? What initiatives have you been driving?
Sure. So I'm the chair of the DEIB committee here at Sonoma. And Sonoma Bio, along with all the other companies, was really, taken aback and horrified by a lot of things that have happened in the world recently and still continue to happen. And so they formed a DEIB committee before I was there. And so they had actually really set up a nice, set of mission, vision, values, and things like that. So I had a backdrop to start with. I've since I've come in, have been working with the committee to bring a lot of content to Sonoma, as well as discussions, trainings, things like that. So we've relaunched, because it's been a couple of years, unconscious bias and allyship training, both in a system online as well as in a discussion format at the company. I've also hosted DEIB summits with students from like SACNAS and other groups at schools that are minority groups and diversity groups. And we've had our scientists give panels and talks and things like that. We also invited a couple of speakers this year. One was one of our board members, who is a Black woman and went to Harvard and couldn't have done it without affirmative action. And so we talked about the impacts that affirmative action going away will have on diversity recruitment efforts. We also had a person come to talk who was a trans male, and they talked about the science of being trans. And then we had a book club thereafter. One of the books that they recommended was called Delusions of Gender. And so we read and discussed that book. So, but we're thinking about, what podcasts can we listen to? Not everybody has time to read a book, especially if it's dense and scientific. And we've talked about getting additional speakers in. And we're doing it a little grassroots style on a shoestring as a startup, but I try really hard to work with the committee to get new and fresh ideas and make sure that we're bringing, varied and diverse content to the folks at Sonoma.
And in your opinion, Melissa, who is responsible for driving these DE&I initiatives? Who should be involved?
Everyone. It should be leadership. It should be, the people. It shouldn't just be, HR or people in culture, as we're called at Sonoma. And I think, we've talked about changing our name because, we shouldn't be the only people influencing culture. We shouldn't be dictating the culture to the company. And so these are some of the initiatives that we're working on from an HR perspective as well, just to, to keep diversity at the focus.
And what advice would you give to people who are listening, who want to create diversity inclusion initiatives? What advice would you give them?
I would say, the data is out there, or the data are out there. There are a lot of free resources that people have made available. And so it's really not hard, even if you are a startup like my company is, it's not hard to do the research out there and bring together programming. There's Lean In has some great free programming, and they'll do a train the trainer with you. They have and so they'll take you through all of it. So there is a lot of at least starting materials out there. And I think it's important also to of course have the data to bring to leadership, and make sure that you have executive sponsorship.
I think it's really important to go and seek the resources, because 10 years ago, these resources were not readily available, and it was very, very difficult for these initiatives to be created within a business. I think that we've come really, really far, and by sharing those resources and really giving each other the support to be able to build these is where we're going to create change. I also wanted to find out a little bit from you, Melissa, as to the advice that you would give industry professionals, because we have seen 2023 be a very difficult year for talent in the life sciences industry. We've seen lots of job cuts, we've seen redundancies. There's been a difficult environment created for a lot of really talented industry professionals. And for you, obviously being at the forefront of talent now for Sonoma, I'm sure you've got lots of advice that you give out daily to your team. But what would you say? What would be your advice to industry professionals right now?
So as I feel like obvious as it seems, it's leverage your network. I just this week talked to a couple people who I've worked with before and who said, "Hey, I'm starting my search. I know you don't have a job for me necessarily, but can we talk? And, can you look over my resume and let's discuss what the options are." Right? So it doesn't have to be do you have a job for me? It can be just, "Hey, let's talk." And then I was like, "Oh, I know some people to whom I could float your resume and at least get the conversation started." But if you don't sort of put it out there in the universe, then the universe isn't going to know, right? So leverage your network, but also put it out there, and don't hesitate to reach out to people who you might have worked with, once a long time ago, and they may not remember you, but they may. So, don't be afraid to step out there.
Yeah, it's fantastic advice. I think that we talk really openly here at Lift Up about your network being so important, and if you can leverage somebody that you know in the industry that might be able to support you, people are always going to want to help. Even if it's not them, they can point you in the right direction of somebody who can. So that's wonderful advice, and thank you for sharing your career story with us as well, because I think your route into the industry is really interesting, and I hope it can inspire definitely a younger generation who are maybe looking to explore a career from academia and break through into industry. And I'm sure you will join me in saying that the talent world, it's really rewarding. It's a fantastic space to be in, to match talented people with really exciting companies that are creating innovation. It's a rewarding market to be in for sure.
It absolutely is. And then also just to be able to contribute to, life-changing therapeutics, I think is the icing on the cake.
Yeah, it's being able to put the right person in the right place to make the contributions that will directly impact the patients. I think that's where this career can be so rewarding. And for you personally, Melissa, as well, we appreciate your involvement in our Lift Up community. I wanted to find out from you why you wanted to join us. What is it about Lift Up that's been of interest for you?
Absolutely. I think just, female empowerment is something that I'm very passionate about, as well as, having resources for people like myself, especially as I've mentioned a few times, I'm at a startup company. I'm not necessarily, we are very progressive, and we have lots going on, and and things are great, but it's not something where I want to join chief or something like that. And part of that is cost, right? But part of it is also just how this seemed a lot more organic, and it seemed a lot more sort of coming together in a way that that made me comfortable, rather than just feeling like I have to pay a subscription for something. And not that, that's the only factor in my decision, but I think, just the approach and the, kind of what you're doing, the mission, it resonated with me.
Yeah, and it's resonated for us so personally too, as I think there's so much work that our industry can do to help really promote women and help support women, and we strongly believe that women should have access to these resources and access to a community without requiring a subscription fee. we're also very, very fortunate to have a group of male allies who are really spreading the word of our community and promoting the work that we are doing. And between us all, no matter what area you specialize in the industry, no matter how senior you are within the business, how experienced you are, I think coming together as a community will allow us to really create some change and really help to give women more opportunities. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for running through your career story. It's been really insightful to learn about the moves that you have made in your career. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really, really appreciate it.